Welcome back to Fundamentals of Chemistry. In this fifth module, we're going to focus on the interplay between energy and chemistry, which is known as chemical thermodynamics or thermochemistry. From everyday life, we all have experience with chemical processes and chemical substances transferring energy in the form of work or heat. In this module, in this course, our focus is really going to be on a conceptual understanding of what's going on during these processes. We'll do very few calculations. I'll show some equations just to give us actually a conceptual foundation for exactly what we mean when we talk about the technical versions of terms like work and heat, which you have intuitions on from everyday life, but we'll do very few calculations. And the goal of this module really is to leave with a solid conceptual understanding of the laws and principles of thermodynamics and an ability really to frame problems in thermodynamics and thermochemistry. Not necessarily solve, but actually frame the problem correctly. This will go a long way towards solving thermochemistry problems correctly, actually, because framing the problem right will get you halfway or more to the solution. You'll know which equations to use, what's my system, what's my surroundings, how do the laws of thermodynamics come into play with this, and that kind of thing. So we're going to start in this video with an introduction to the nature of energy and energy units. We'll also talk about the fundamental equivalence of energy, heat, and work. And then we'll move into general ideas for solving problems in chemical thermodynamics, and finally, a discussion of the first law of thermodynamics, which is a fantastic jumping off point when you're solving thermodynamics problems. We won't talk about the second law here. I'll leave that for your introductory chemistry course, but the first law will give us a taste of what the laws of thermodynamics talk about. So again, in this first video, we're going to focus on energy. We'll learn how to recognize and define energy and its various forms, and then we'll learn how to recognize and convert between the most common units of energy in chemistry, focusing here really on this fundamental equivalence between energy, heat, and work. Before we get to that, though, let's talk about exactly what we mean by this term, energy. It's one of those things you have intuition on it from everyday life. We all have an intuitive idea of what energy is, what energy means, but to really make this term scientific, we need to be able to measure it and quantify it. So in science, energy is a quantitative property of a physical system that we can recognize, that we can measure in the performance of work and or in the form of heat emitted or light emitted. And energy is one of those things, we know it when we see it, right? When a system does work or transfers heat, emits heat, we know that at least it had energy, right? And in studying the laws and principles that govern the transfer of energy between physical systems, we're engaging in what's called thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is a very, very broad field that transcends chemistry, really. Chemical thermodynamics focuses on chemical processes, chemical change, and chemical substances, and things like phase transitions, substance going from gas to liquid, liquid to solid, things like this. That's thermodynamics. Thermochemistry tends to be focused on heat and refers specifically to the study of heat transfers associated with chemical reactions or phase transitions. I often think of the internal combustion engine here as a focus of thermodynamic studies over the years, right? The thermodynamic optimization of the internal combustion engine was a big part of automobile development in the early days, for example. Let's talk about how we classify and categorize different types of energy. And there is more than one way to do this. I focus on two general ideas on this slide in terms of how we'll categorize and classify energy. The first concerns whether the energy is the result of effects inside the system or outside of the system. Energy based on an external reference frame is called external energy, and this is not our concern in thermodynamics really at all. The example I often use here is the idea that all of us are on Earth hurtling through the solar system, right, at breakneck speed around the sun, right? And so we all have energy associated with our motion through the solar system, but this is not at all our concern because We can only see the energy outside our frame of reference on planet Earth. What we're concerned with is the internal energy of the planet Earth and everything that's on it, right? Internal energy is due to the motion or position of particles within a system and will be your focus when you talk about chemical thermodynamics. Always, always, always. The focus is on internal energy, the energy inside a chemical system. Another distinction we make is between energy due to motion and energy due to position. And again, from everyday life, we know that objects in motion have energy just by virtue of their motion, right? They can bump into things and transfer that energy in the process of colliding with something. That energy due to motion is called kinetic. However, systems can also have energy, and particles within systems can have energy due to distances between them when there's some sort of distance-dependent effect going on, like the attraction or repulsion of charges or the attractive forces of gravity. And that energy due to relative position is known as potential energy. Now, this distinction between external and internal energy, let me return to this to finish off this slide. This depends on how we define the system, right? What counts as internal depends on how we define the system. If we're interested in the solar system as a whole, then our energy on Earth hurtling through space becomes really important. It actually becomes internal to the solar system as a whole. And so in some cases, we might be interested in the energy of everyone hurtling through space on Earth. In many cases, we would not. And in chemical thermodynamics, we always define the system in a particular way, focusing on the atoms and molecules inside the substance or substances of interest. And how we solve chemical thermodynamics problems depends profoundly on how we define the system. So we'll talk about this in the next video in more detail. Let's talk about the units of energy. Energy manifests itself in thermodynamics in two ways, either as work or heat. Because of this, all three quantities, energy, heat, and work, all share the same units. Any unit that we can use for work, we can use for energy. We can also use it for heat. Any unit we can use for heat, we can use for energy and work, etc. They all share the same units. And on this slide and the next, we're going to get under the hood of work and heat a little bit more and talk about their formal technical definitions in chemical thermodynamics. Work is the coordinated movement of a force through a distance. And I often think here as a prototypical example of lifting a box against gravity. That box experiences a downward force due to the force against gravity. If I lift it off the ground through a distance delta x, I'm doing work on the box, right? And that work we can calculate and quantify as the magnitude of the force in a unit like the Newton, which is the SI unit of force, times the distance or displacement of that force, delta x here, and that's in length units, something like meters. If I multiply those two together, I get a Newton meter, and this is the SI unit of work and the SI unit of energy, and it's known as the joule. This equation applies when the force does not depend on the position of the object in space. In the more general case, when the force is distance dependent, we'd have to do an integral. You'll never do this in an introductory chemistry course, but I show it just in case you get into more advanced thermodynamics where doing integrals like this will become relatively common. If you haven't seen calculus before, don't worry about this. That's okay. You'll get to it later. All right, now is also a convenient time to mention electrical work. When we move a charge through a potential difference, we're doing work on that charge. We're moving against kind of the natural direction that the potential difference wants to move the charge. We're doing electrical work, and it's the product of charge and voltage that has units of energy. The voltage is that potential difference, and the charge depends on the particle we're dealing with. A common unit of electrical work, particularly for the very, very small atomic and molecular scale, is the electron volt. This is the charge on one electron times the potential difference of 1 volt. The work required to move an electron across a potential difference of 1 volt is known as the electron volt. The charge on one electron is very, very, very tiny. So this is a highly convenient unit for that atom or molecule scale. We also do work when we compress a gas, and this is very common commonly thought about and taught in introductory chemistry courses. And the work we do in compressing a gas is known as pressure volume work, or PV work. The gas does work when it expands, so you'll also hear this referred to as expansion work. And the idea here is if we start, let's say, with a gas in a closed container whose volume can vary via a piston, if we press down on that piston and compress the gas, the volume has decreased, the pressure has increased, and we've done work on the gas. And to quantify that work, we actually still do the force distance calculation, but now we're multiplying a pressure, which is a force per unit area, times the change in volume, right? Which is a length times an area, if you think about volume, right? So this is essentially force times distance. And the negative sign appears here so that compression, decreasing the volume, right? V2 less than V1 results in positive work. This becomes convenient when we relate the work to a change in energy in the system. Doing work on the system should correspond to positive value of work, so that the change, because the change in energy of the system is also positive. This is why this negative sign is here. It ensures that the signs of W and the change in internal energy of the system will match on compression. Another thing this teaches us is that work can be expressed in units of a pressure times a volume. This can be done, for example, by multiplying 1 atmosphere times 1 liter. 1 liter atmosphere is a unit of work corresponding to the work required to compress a gas by 1 liter against a constant pressure of 1 atmosphere. And similarly to the previous slide, if the pressure varies with the volume, which is very common and in fact is going to happen in this closed container type of situation, we have to integrate negative P dV over the volume change. You'll never do this in an introductory chemistry course. You'll always worry about constant pressure situations. But in more advanced thermodynamics courses, you'll absolutely see this where the pressure varies with the volume, for instance, in accordance with the ideal gas law. Heat is the transfer of thermal energy, and we most often recognize heat when a temperature change has taken place. So for example, if we start with a cold object at T1, apply heat to it, we end up with that object at a greater temperature T2, and we know that some positive amount of heat has been applied to the object in order to achieve that. But heat is fundamentally the same as work and energy. So the units of heat have to match the units of energy. And so heat, we can't just express heat in units of degrees Celsius or Kelvin or degrees Fahrenheit, right? What we need is a kind of conversion factor from the temperature change to an amount of heat. And this is what's known as the heat capacity. It's represented with the capital letter C. And so, for example, if our temperature changes in degrees Celsius and our heat is in joules, joule is a very common unit for heat and work, then the heat capacity, this conversion factor from temperature to heat, needs to have units of joules per degree Celsius. And again, in general, the heat capacity is temperature dependent, and in that case, we have to do an integral over the temperature change of the specific heat as a function of, the heat capacity as a function of temperature, C of T dt. We can also define units of heat with respect to some standard process, for example, heating water. This leads to the calorie, which is the heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of liquid water by 1 degree Celsius. Another way of saying this is that the specific heat capacity of water is 1 calorie per degree Celsius per gram. Highly convenient unit. And this is about 4 joules, so it's a little bit bigger than a joule. It's a very common unit, particularly in organic chemistry, mainly for historical reasons. So to sum up, in this video, we looked at definitions of and manifestations of heat, work, and energy, focusing on the idea that energy, heat, and work are fundamentally the same thing, an idea we'll return to in later discussions of the first law. We also looked at ways of classifying and categorizing energy, focusing primarily on internal energy and the way it can manifest itself as either kinetic or potential. And then general conceptual ideas about thermochemistry and thermodynamics and their definitions. In the next video, we're going to dig into general ideas for solving thermodynamic problems, particularly zeroing in on exactly what we mean by a thermodynamic system, how we classify and categorize thermodynamic systems, and deal with different kinds of thermodynamic systems differently in different types of problems.